Hi, my name is Nancy Fishman, and on behalf of the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival and the Jewish Film Institute, I want to welcome Petra, Epperlein, and Michael Tucker, directors of The Meaning of Hitler, to our Q&A. And I also want to give a shout out to our ASL interpreters, Tisha and Beth. We are making an effort to make our films more accessible, and we're very excited that they're here. So Michael and Petra, I thought I'd start off by asking you if you could talk about the origins of the film, and if you had read Sebastian Haffner's book, The Meaning of Hitler, before you set out to make the film, or was there an incident in current events that prompted you to make the film?
Actually, it's a combination of many things. I had read the book many years ago and was always fascinated and passed it around as required reading to everybody. But the real inspiration came from when we were filming in Germany in 2015 or 16?
2015.
Yeah, we were filming in Dresden in the southeast. We were filming a demonstration of the then very new right-wing movement, Pegida. I don't know if you know that. It stands for Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of the Occident, very weird wording. And there were like 30,000 people marching with torches, shouting, lying press, and many other things. And that was very disturbing. Not only that so many people came out, but they chose their language right from the Third Reich, from the Nazi playbook. So that felt like we should do something.
And I think previously, when you saw there would be some large demos in Germany from extreme right wings, but what was really frightening about this was like, what they were, Monday nights or Tuesday nights?
Monday nights.
They would have demonstrations every Monday night. And these were not skinheads. These were people wearing sort of like REI rain shells and carrying umbrellas and sort of everything from our age to our parents' age, young people who look like you would think were liberal, and they were sort of in this mass movement against immigration with all of these darker undertones. And you could see that something was happening, and it was bigger than anything that was certainly going on in America. And it's happened throughout Europe. And of course, now we've seen what's happened in America. But it felt like this is the moment. Let's do this.
I also really appreciated the structure of the film with all the locations that Hitler lived in and were of importance to him. Can you talk a little bit about your creative and editorial process and how you settled on the structure?
That's a little bit tricky. I mean, we went through all sorts of, it's a massive topic. I mean, I was at a point where I was practically suicidal. I was like, you will drive yourself insane with this because you can go on and on and on. And there were two things that were funny. One, the first impulse was, let's follow sort of the path of his life. And it takes you to all these very interesting places and you sort of weave in current events. And that's sort of what we did. At the same time, let's meet people. But then you meet one person and that leads you to another person. And the topic is endless. I mean, if you look through the archives of the New York Review of Books, I mean, Hitler goes, I mean, just the sheer amount of writing about this person and this time and this ideology is enormous. So how do you do it? And how do you do it without glorifying Hitler and Nazism?
Yeah, the process was very long. I mean, we started working in 2016, 2017 on the film, and it was at times really, the editing process was very painful at times because we had accumulated way too much material.
I think you did a great job. I feel like the pacing of the film is really engaging, and I feel like I'm on a journey with you as you sort of go through the geographical locations of sort of his life and also the locations where fascism is kind of burgeoning again. So you interviewed a panoply of Holocaust historians and scholars and curators and a few Nazi deniers too. And I wanted to ask you how you decided to interview the people you interviewed, was there anyone you wished was in the film who was not available?
Well, the funniest thing is that, well, there were two.
There were a few, actually. We wanted to talk to Claude Lanzmann. Unfortunately, he died. That was just...
we were literally like...
People are on our way to Paris, but that didn't happen. We wanted to talk to a few other people, but generally everyone who we reached out to talk to, all the historians, were very eager and welcoming to talk to us. So how did we decide on, we had our locations and our themes, and then we always thought of who's the best expert to explain things, not only to us, but to the audience. And that's how we kind of found people.
And it's also interesting that some of these people that are in the film, there's sort of a current wave of talking about fascism or talking about the far right with much younger historians and writers. But these sort of old school guys like Yehuda Bauer, I mean, how old is he now?
I don't know, he must be in his late 90s.
I mean, it's incredible. I mean, he's 90s, he must be 96 or 97. He's still sort of the go-to person. If you want the common sense something, you have to go see him. And he provides probably a better explanation than anyone else I can think of. Saul Friedlander, the same thing. And there's also people like Klaus Teweleit, who had a book that was huge in the 70s, which has had sort of a comeback, which, people really should be reading, because we've gone through this many times before. And I think this time, but this time it's really for real, what we're facing.
I thought you also did an excellent job of examining how resurgent nationalism and fascism resonate today with the Nazi past, including some really well-placed video and audio clips of Trump and also Polish and German far-right parties. So was it difficult to decide how much of this material to include? And can you talk about your intent in including it?
You want to start?
Well, I mean, when we were coming up with the concept for the film, before we really started shooting, Charlottesville happened. So, of course, the great temptation there is Charlottesville. I mean, of course, what we all saw there was pretty shocking. Trump's comments were somewhat horrible. But then, there's always that thing, do you want to go fully that way? And there's been a debate among historians, sort of like, when do you call it fascism? Is it fascism yet? And I think that was always sort of in the background. And it's been interesting, as we shot the film, as we edited the film, as we moved to finish the film. I mean, we were finishing editing as riot police were beating people in front of the White House. And then, of course, the film had its first public showing right after the election. And IFC came on board, I think, right after the insurrection. So it's been interesting to see like the worst case scenario become real.
Yeah, since you brought up Trump when we started making the film, and Trump was elected, so everyone invoked the comparison between Trump and Hitler, and we thought like, oh, that's ridiculous. Let's not go there because Trump's not Hitler, obviously. But then while things are going on, there were all these I don't even know what to call them. There were these things happening. There was the lying going on to an extent. I mean, Martin Amis talks about it so beautifully, and there was a normalization of all that. Let's just focus on the lying. It became a totally normal thing throughout the last 5 years, let's say, and that bothers us. So bothers us, of course, like. But you didn't really have to have the direct comparison to Trump all the time because, everyone knows what's going on.
There was the lying. The other interesting thing is it's spoken about a few times, is the distortion of history. I think that it's really interesting now when this argument about so-called critical race theory comes up. I mean, these are arguments that have been going on in places like Poland. I mean, it's unbelievable that Hungary, Russia, and now these arguments are happening in school boards in the suburbs, like in America. It's kind of insane when you think about it. So,
It is. I thought you guys were really judicious in the amount of audio and visual you used of Trump, and I thought it was very successful because it was very subtle and insidious, which is kind of the nature of how fascism sort of creeps into polite discourse. So I thought you were really successful in how much you used. I also wanted to ask, Martin Amis says in the film, our understanding of Hitler is central to our understanding of ourselves. So after steeping yourself in this discourse with Holocaust scholars and historians, how do you think we can best educate younger generations about the Holocaust?
Well, this is a very big question. I mean, maybe everyone should watch our movie. I don't know, in this long period of time where we spent so much time thinking about all of this. Yeah, I have no idea. You can just continue the conversation. Actually, that's the most important part. You have to talk about it over and over and over again. We are in Berlin, Germany right now. And when I tell people about the film we just made, very often I have my liberal friends, they react and say like, yeah, but we dealt with that and we talked about it and everyone knows about it. But, this is actually not true. You can never really deal with it. This is an ongoing process and we have to talk about it over and over again, massively. Yeah.
Petra, I know you are from the GDR originally. Can you talk about what making this film was like on a personal level?
In regards to being from East Germany?
Yes.
I don't know if there's any, if I even have to say anything. I mean, I'm a German. That's more like the thing. What is always, what's the word? It's tricky, I mean, of course, there's a responsibility as a German to pay a special amount of attention to the subject matter. And but I wouldn't say like as an East German, it's different than being in West German. I mean, although maybe you are hinting at the fact, I mean, there are these statistics that in East Germany, there is a higher percentage of people hating foreigners and voting for the far right AfD. Yeah, it's hard to generalize that. I don't really know why this is happening. There is an election coming up and will be involved somewhere in processes and we'll see how it goes. I hope that is not like an ongoing trend.
I always admire documentary filmmakers for taking on big historical projects. And I think you addressed this in an earlier question about sort of how overwhelming it was, but I'm curious how you prepared for this film in terms of history or were there films you, did you kind of have a reading list or a list of films you had to see?
I mean, we could just pick up the computer right now and walk to our library and show you what we have. It was pretty endless.
It was a funny story is that we relocated from upstate New York to Europe. We began last summer and we were having a garage sale in the middle of the pandemic in New York. And we had all of the DVDs that we had watched. So like on our lawn, there was like, it was a sea of like Hitler and Nazism.
It was feature films, because I mean, there is an endless amount of Hitler being in feature films. And
early on, there weren't really any takers for this mountain of Hitler. And apparently then one guy stopped by and he was like digging through them. And he ended up taking like half of them. And he said they were for his mother. So it's kind of, I mean, the amount of stuff we watched was interesting, but there is something sort of back to what you were saying before about, what do we do with this? How do we further this conversation? And I think that there's a real problem in cinema and how it treats this, especially how it treats the Holocaust. I mean, it's become so, even when it means well, it really exploits this suffering. It almost extends what the Nazis were doing, which was this humiliation, rather than really trying to grapple with it. And I think, you've probably watched Shoah at least once. It's interesting with Claude Lanzmann. He always said, if there was footage of what happened in the gas chambers, he would destroy it. He had this crazy idea that he would destroy it because he didn't want it represented. He wanted you to, and it's a crazy comment, but he wanted people to really grapple with it in the dark. And when you go to a place like Sobibor, where there is really nothing except trees, and you stand in the forest, that's sort of how you have to deal with it. It really hits you. And I just wish that young people had more of an opportunity to really not to be shocked by something, but to really think about, like, what does that mean? What does this hatred mean? What's the consequence of it? And all of those films are just sort of, we call it in the film sort of the Nazi cinematic universe. It's become this thing. And this thing obviously doesn't work. It doesn't stop this ideology from spreading. So what are we doing?
Yeah, maybe I can just add something. One of the themes we explore a little bit in the film is the fact that, of course, most of the archival material, what we have from that time, is produced by the Nazis themselves. So basically, us using that for propaganda purposes to just illustrate how great they were, right? They didn't produce any footage from the crimes they committed, but from everything else. And since that's mostly what we have available, using that over again is basically by perpetuating the mythology of Nazism. And that's very problematic. Of course, mostly it's the materials being used in context or with commentary, but still, these images, they have people are so attracted to them for whatever reasons. And this is, one should think about this more often, to use that over and over again.
So in order to avoid the kind of fetishization of Nazism that you're talking about, can you talk about how you chose which archival footage to use?
Originally, we wanted to make the film without any archival footage, but then we realized that it becomes too abstract. That's not going to work.
People were like, you are crazy. So we had little sprinkles in there, and then we became more selective. And Saul Friedlander was hugely helpful in understanding the power of those images and understanding the intent of those images. And the most important thing about understanding Nazi aesthetics is understanding the idea of this pageant. These people wanted to live forever, and they're living forever in those images. So for me, I almost kind of take a Lanzmann sort of approach. It wouldn't hurt I would almost go as far as that most of these images should have been destroyed. They don't serve any purpose. I don't know if you know this, but there are 4 still photographs from Auschwitz showing the killing operation. There are pictures from the ramp and the sorting operations. There are some film footage of people being executed by bullets in the Baltics, but there was very little footage of these operations, and so we've created these fictionalized versions of it, which I think, in a weird way, they're kind of productive. They glorify it, and then on the other hand, we show endless streams of Nazi glory, and it serves no. I'm not sure what it is. There's the famous Star Trek episode where, I think an alien civilization is modeled on Nazi Germany. You can imagine these images being broadcast out, forever. What would people do with them?
I think it must have been a difficult task to figure out what to use. And I found I did appreciate the sort of resonance between the tiki torches that people carried in Charlottesville and then the lights, torches that people carried in the Riefenstahl films. And I felt like you did a great job of kind of almost like a jump cut from one era to the next. I was also really glad that you touched on the issues of social media and truth. And I was personally disturbed when Mark Zuckerberg said that he did not believe that Holocaust denial material should be taken down. And I thought it was really spot on to include that audio clip. And I wanted to ask, did you think about interviewing Zuckerberg for the film?
No.
No. I mean, I think, that whole take that he had at that moment on that, and of course it's changed since then, is such an idiotic take. And I think that's at the heart of what the film is about. For me, it's about that. It's twofold. One is, oh, well, they don't really mean it, or they don't really believe it. And then it's the other thing about lying and what people say and this distortion of history and whatever. I mean, if there's any takeaway from this history and this moment we're in right now, is that people mean what they say. If someone says they're going to not agree with the results of the election, well, they're probably not going to agree with the results of the election. If people keep on saying these things and amplifying them over and over and over again, then they probably believe it. And I think in the world of the Zuckerbergs, I don't know what weird planet they live on. Social media, especially with young people, like in these gaming communities or whatever. I mean, I was shocked to see how mainstream, like really dark anti-Semitism is. I mean, there's the one clip of the young woman who's the gamer in the film during that Charlottesville episode. I mean, it's hard to see on screen, but if you read what people are writing in the text, I mean, these are little kids. I mean, this is revolting. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying how normalized all of this is.
Yeah. Was there anything surprising that you learned about Hitler that you didn't know before?
About Hitler, particular? No. I mean, not really. That's an interesting question. No, I don't, nothing comes to mind, actually. I don't think Hitler as a person is really that interesting. I mean, people write all these biographies about it. I mean, ultimately, Hitler was a mass murderer. And that's actually all what you need to know about him. And I don't know, every year there's another 2-volume, really thick Hitler biography coming out. Not sure what the point is, because it doesn't matter if whatever happened to him, the society enabled him, or they went along with what plans he had. And yeah, ultimately, again, he was a mass murderer.
But also the takeaway, maybe it's not Hitler, like something we didn't know, but a way to think about then, and then to think about this moment and why this is so attractive to people. Klaus Teweleit, the German writer, really helped us understand this idea that someone like Hitler gives people permission to act on what they're feeling. And when I think about everything that's happened in the last year in America, I find this chilling, especially as I'm reading today where people are saying, oh, it wasn't that bad, or it was just this little thing that happened. And then you see images of retired policemen beating other policemen with pipes. I mean, if we had made some sort of connection like that when we started making the film, people would have thought we were crazy. And to see that happening now, that's sort of the biggest takeaway. So what was unleashed in these people by this person or by a Hitler to feel that they are right to do this?
That they have a license to behave this way.
Yeah. That they have the permission to totally go over to the dark side. Yeah, that's the interesting thing.
I was fascinated by your interview with historian Uta Frevert, I hope I pronounced her name right, who talks about Hitler thinking about the masses as feminine and his efforts to whip up emotions and tame people at the same time. And also the fact that Eva Braun rarely appeared with him in public so that German women all over could think of themselves as potential fascist brides. So my question is, how do you think the hyper-masculinity of fascism is playing out today in right-wing movements?
Well, I mean, Uta's fantastic. And I love what we loved about her is that she makes this connection without it being super obvious. But
Before you go into this, actually, that was a detail that I did not know before. I mean, I never thought about it before. Like the German public never knew that Eva, or nobody ever knew that Eva Braun even existed. I mean, she wasn't even present, you know. That's actually, that goes into that Hitler was always, or the German people were the bride of Hitler, basically.
But it's also funny when you look at Hitler, you don't think hyper masculine, but obviously something was at work there. Also, that's why we put Klaus Teweleit and Udo Frevert together. I mean, Teweleit writes so extensively about misogyny. I mean, about this deep, deep, deep hatred of women. I mean, a violent hatred. And yet those things paired together. And I think you see that anywhere where this flourishes, whether it's, Poland, Hungary, Russia, parts of the American right wing. I mean, those things all live together, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you call Trump a right-wing leader, or I don't know if that's a thing? But I mean,
I think so.
He's not he's not. I mean, he's not a symbol of like attractive masculinity or anything, right? He's this bully who is like, I don't know, everyone is bullied by him. I don't understand it at all, but yeah, it's curious.
It's incredibly similar.
On a smaller note or a smaller detail, I was amused and curious by your decision to shoot or include a lot of archival footage through the classic hood ornament of a Mercedes-Benz. And I was curious what prompted this creative decision.
Well, we had this idea originally to give, this was one of your first questions, what's the structure? How do you find the structure? And the structure was going to places which were tainted by Hitler, and Hitler loved driving around in a Mercedes. He had one of the bestest and biggest cars. He never drove by himself. He was always driven around. And there is a bunch of footage and images shot through, like the archival footage, through that perspective. So we kind of borrowed from that, going from place to place to...
Yeah, it starts in Triumph of the Will. They use the Mercedes hood ornament, and then later Eva Braun does it in her color footage. But then the most shocking thing, we decided to not include it in the film. There's really, really shocking footage of driving through the ghetto, which is shot with the Mercedes emblem in the foreground. And one reason we didn't include it, which is a whole other subject, is that so many people who are licensing this footage, which are, to me, is more like evidence than footage, they're profiting from it still. I mean, the German government charges 14,000 euros per minute to use footage, essentially, of war crimes, which I find absolutely astounding that is even possible.
Yeah, and also using the Mercedes symbol is like a little subliminal way of pointing out the complicity of the German industry with the Nazi regime.
Yeah. I appreciated your ending the film with Saul Friedlander, with Friedlander's encouragement at the death camp Sobibor, which he called the unknowable spot, as you said. Can you tell me if you had other places in mind that you were thinking of ending the film? Had you thought of ending it at a camp, or what were the things you debated, or what were the ideas that you were tossing around before you came to that?
I think Sobibor was really, I think for both of us, was sort of like it was very personal. It was sort of like a pilgrimage you have to go on. And
it is a very strong place. We went there a few times. Yeah, it affected us strongly, and we hoped to be able to communicate the power of the emptiness, the beauty of the landscape there, and the terrific crimes happened there, to communicate that, you know.
But also back to your original question about the teaching of the history of the understanding is also understanding, like, it's ongoing. And that's something that you see in all of these sites, is like, how do you it's not like that you reach a point where you go like, oh, we understand what happened. You have to continue trying to like dig deeper to reveal everything that you can. And that's sort of like with our archaeologist that's in the film. What he's doing there is a little bit crazy, but it's really trying to account. If he finds one name or can identify one person, then it's putting a face on this.
We're sort of coming to the end of our time, and I wanted to thank you for, I think you did an amazing job of taking a huge subject and a very complex subject and distilling it into something that made us think, and also interviewed a great array of people sort of who are at the top of their field in thinking about the Holocaust and trying to tackle the enormity of it. So is there anything else you would want the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival audience to know about this film or about the process of making it?
These are always these hard questions.
No, I think it's what was interesting to me, we're filmmakers, obviously, is that, and again, we talked about this with Amos, understanding this is essential to who we are, and I think it's actually really hard work, and there's probably nothing better that anyone can do than to fill up their own home libraries with these people like Friedlander, Bauer, Lipstadt, Teveleit, Frevert. I mean, these are this just essential reading, and that can really have an impact, I think, on young people to go deep into it. And it's difficult and to really talk about these books.
Yeah, I also believe traveling to these places is really important. I mean, not, of course, everyone can just travel to Poland, but it makes a huge difference to be at the place.
Thank you so much for making such a compelling and essential film, and for sharing it with our audience.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for watching the film, and tell everybody to watch it and have discussions about it.
Are you doing live screenings or?
I believe there's only 2 days of live screenings. I think it's like closing night and something else. So most of the films are online.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we wish you well at the end of this pandemic.
Yes.
Thank you, and good luck with the film and your next projects.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.